live stream. Hopefully, you're all having a great week. My name's Russell. I'm here with some great people today and a special guest of ours. Good morning, Danny. Good morning, Randall. And good morning, Eric. How are you guys this morning?
Good, man.
Good.
Doing good? By the
Good,
way,
good.
for Randall, it's Saturday, October 5th at 9 a.m. And Danny hit it nail on the head today, 9 a.m. So,
Yeah, no messing around. It was like,
I was
I think
getting
five
worried.
seconds
yeah,
Yeah.
that 9 o'clock minute was going by real fast.
every
But wait,
time.
the clock right here says 7:15.
uh, good morning. Good morning, all the people in the comments. We got Kelly, Chris. How are you guys? We got a really special episode today. I'm actually really psyched for this one because I've been watching this guy, Eric. I don't know how long you've been actually with us in the incubator. It's been quite a few months now, but
Since
um,
April.
since April. Awesome.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, yeah, it's hard to remember exactly.
I know. There's time flies, man, especially during the
Uh,
summer. I feel like the summer
yeah,
flies by. But it's been really awesome to watch Eric's progress through our program and um see sort of like how he's changed and evolved and continuing to take on new things every week. So if you're just tuning in, the I guess the title of today's live stream is give you guys a little bit of experience of where Eric came from, what his goals were as a software developer, and how he's progressed from what he's done as his former career as a truck driver, which he's still doing right now, but now taking on a role of a web developer, reaching out to companies, working with local businesses, and building them websites. So I don't want to tell it all, but Eric, let's turn it over to you. I mean, can you give us a little bit of background about what your interest is in software development and how you got started? I know you did, I think it was like a boot camp or a university degree. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
I
Yeah,
uh I went to University of Phoenix online.
cool.
Started my pursuit of a bachelor's degree probably over 10 years ago. I kind of went on and off. Um Finished my bachelor's program expecting, like most people, that they could go get a job.
Yep.
Um, and then reality hit, and no, you can't just go get a job with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You got to have that real life experience.
you used to
So
be
I
able
was,
to decades
yeah,
ago.
Yeah.
right.
10 years ago. It's funny because we
But
just had, I want to actually welcome Brandy, who's in the comments. She just joined the Web Dev Incubator last night, and she has, similar experience. She's in a boot camp right now. And I was explaining to her sort of the same thing is like a lot of these boot camps and university degrees, they sell their programs on the premise of like, just take our program and then Google will call you
This
on
is what you need,
graduation day and
you
give
know?
you, hoping to get you on board. And the reality is, it's really not. It's not like that, right? Not anymore, at least. I just read something yesterday about. I think Mark Zuckerberg is now the second richest person in the world. I think now due to like Facebook's valuation. Okay, so like Facebook basically just had like one of the best years ever, and yet they also just fired 21,000 people. So think about that for a
That's
second.
why he's worth more now, though,
Yeah,
because
but
it's off his stock. Yeah.
and that's the reality, right? Is years ago when these boot camps and university degrees were super popular, they became that way because these tech companies were in competition for each other to just hire as many developers as they could. And so they were hiring basically anyone under the sun who had a any sort of credentials. And now they've realized like having a giant team is not really effective, I guess. And so now they're being more discerning and they have pick of the litter, right? They have the ability to choose the best developers out there and really pay them the least now because there's so much competition.
Yeah.
so this is I've been looking forward to this live stream since we first talked about it, because
Since you
this is
came
like
up
a
with the
really,
topic.
yeah, exactly. But but this is like a really important thing, because a lot of people get into development, they start doing tutorials online,
but like they kind of get stuck, and it's a really, really hard bridge to gap to get from just like learning coding to actually working as a web
Or
developer.
to feeling like
So
you can
Yeah.
too, right? Because that's the other thing, like that, like
yeah,
feeling
so
confident enough too is hard to get there.
so I'm curious, Eric, back when you started, like did you have that type of experience where you like wanted to be a developer, but you just really didn't know how to go about it? Or do you remember what your experience was like before you started working?
Yeah, so when I finished school, they had career services there to try and help you, guide you towards starting a career. So I spoke with them, but it didn't really help me much. All they really told me is, well, you need to get some projects under your belt, but they wouldn't, like, they don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, so
None of them are working
all
in the
I,
field either,
all I
right? So it's
could do
like,
is, like you said, look at tutorials, try and figure out, well, what kind of project can I do? I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt lost, like, because there's so much stuff out there, and
Yeah.
the tutorials, they don't tell you like you're gonna run into this issue or that issue when you're doing it. So
Yeah.
I felt that way too when we were first starting because it's like there's so much, and without any clear like idea, it's hard to choose and to know what you're doing is right, you know, or that it's a good thing to focus on. And I think that's also difficult because it's like easy to jump around early on too, and then you don't really progress through anything.
Yeah. Eric, I'm curious, what when you're in the boot camp, what languages were you learning or technologies were you learning at the time?
I pretty much just learned the basics of all kinds of different. Learned Java, Python, SQL, HTML,
Wrote a hello world program in each one, right?
Yeah, yeah.
pretty much.
Pretty much. They're
Like
like, yeah, just keep writing those.
everything was just like an online curriculum. There
Mhm.
was a professor that we could message if we ran into issues or had questions, but really it was like very little coding and a bunch of multiple choice questions that you could just click through if you wanted to. And
Yeah.
it's
That
like
was
it really, I mean, it, I learned from it, but the time I've been in here, I've learned probably 100 times more.
Well, I can tell you too that
it's
what you
awesome.
learned there was probably because of you. Because, I think that's the other thing. Like, people don't realize that those kinds of things, like, if you don't have that, like, motivation, you're not going to learn anything because it is
Yeah.
all self-driven,
Yeah. So you said you've learned like 100 times more inside the incubator. So how do you think that, like, what do you think is the main difference for you from the university degree versus being inside the incubator? Like, why do you think you learned more inside the incubator?
Um, well, one of the things I think really helped is having you guys as mentors, to point me in directions that, um, to achieve what my goals are in
Mhm.
becoming a developer. Um, and learning other things that I never even thought about, because initially when I got out of school, I just was looking for software development. I didn't even know like about different types of positions.
Mhm.
Like I never heard of front end and back end, like
That's
things like
insane because
that.
you go to school
Yeah.
for it. It's like that's like one of the things you should
I
be.
I wasn't even thinking about getting into web development. I was thinking like I was going to be going to a company to create like software specifically for that company.
Mm.
Um, and then when I joined the incubator, like you guys like talking about web development and how pretty much everything is on the web, it kind of changed my perspective and
Yeah.
changed my goals of what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
It's
that's a really good point. I mean, that's something that we emphasize with a lot of our students is that most software nowadays is web based or at least web facing. I remember, I mean, I say this all the time, but I remember when I was a kid, you go to like CompUSA and buy a box with
yeah,
software in it.
with the disc and
But
all,
that,
and like,
yeah, but that doesn't exist anymore, right? So most software is either, accessed directly through a browser
Well, you can get a big
or
box, but it comes with a little code, it doesn't even have,
yeah, yeah.
you just go online.
Dude, I used to remember like literally having a field day with going to CompUSA and looking
Yeah.
through all the boxes of different software. And it was like, none of it was like cool. It was just like word processors and
Dude,
crap.
that's all, yeah. It was like,
But,
and learning to type.
but yeah, I mean, I think also for most people who are getting into any sort of software development, web development is the easiest first step because it is, most people are already familiar with websites to some degree, maybe not how they work necessarily, but at least like they understand how to use a website. So the transition from like being the user to the creator is a little bit easier. I think also HTML and CSS are fairly easy to learn. So that's like a good confidence booster when you're first starting. And then, you know, JavaScript is obviously a big thing to tackle. Um, but learning those, I think, is really important because then every other language, once you learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, pretty much every other language is JavaScript at some core level. So understanding those makes such a big difference if you choose to go on and become like an AI developer, machine learning developer, or take on any other language like Python, Go, Rust, any of those, C++, Java. But I had a similar experience. I mean, when I was in uh, my first year of college, I was a computer science major and I was learning Java, not JavaScript, and it sucked. Like it was brutal, and it's why I quit because it was very, very difficult and it wasn't relatable to anything. Like I had no prior experience where I was like, this makes sense, right? Like it's just like completely new language. So I totally get that. So
Yeah, I hated Java.
yeah,
When I was in that class, I'm like, if this is what programming is gonna be, I can't do this.
that's why I quit. I was in it. I was like debugging for like 4 hours one day in the computer lab and still didn't figure out where the semicolon or whatever it was. And it was like literally, I remember the moment I was like, I'm done. This is it. Like I
It's,
can't. There's no way I'm doing this forever.
well, it's
Um,
crazy too, is how outdated some of these programs can be too, and what they offer because the people instructing it, that's where they work. They don't have to go out and work.
yeah.
And you know what I mean? So it's like, Randall, like you were saying, like when you got out, you were like one of the few people that actually had forgery on your resume because
Mhm.
you're a teacher, that's what he did, and you didn't change anything. So it's like, yeah, you can be really outdated too. And I think they don't give you a good insight into what is actually available now and what's being like used now.
Yeah. So Eric, what have you been doing now? Because I know you've been working with a couple different companies. Um, maybe not necessarily paid quite yet. I know you're sort of
Well,
like on the cusp of a
can I
paid.
ask, we ask
Yeah,
one
yeah,
thing
go
first.
ahead.
What motivated you initially too to switch from what you were doing and what were you doing before and or still doing, I mean, to an extent, but like trying to transition out of and why?
I mean, initially, I really didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do. I just really knew I wanted to do coding. Um, and then I saw how, like you said, how easy HTML and CSS is. So that's why I decided to switch to doing that. Um, and then when you introduced us to Next, it's like even easier. Um, I love
Yeah.
Tailwind compared to CSS.
Oh
Oh my
God, yeah.
God.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Isn't it crazy how a lot of like when you first started with Next, did you feel like apprehensive about using a JavaScript framework? Like, oh my goodness, I don't know
yeah,
JavaScript yet.
I
This is
didn't
a
even know what
framework.
I didn't even know
Yeah.
what frameworks were really, honestly. So, um, and it was a little overwhelming at first, but like once I kind of got used to the way it's organized and everything, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, the organization's scary at first because it seems like crazy confusing. You have 100 folders and like it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's not like one document, but then it does. It's so much easier to write
I
in, I think.
remember I remember very distinctly when we were in our boot camp, we we weren't learning Next.js yet because it wasn't actually, I don't think it was even really released on
No.
a level of like where people were using it. We were all using React. And one of our projects was to build a Hello World app in React. And first of all, they didn't explain like anything of anything. They were just like copy and paste this code.
Do
And
this
we're
command.
like, yeah, we were like, why on earth are there 15 folders, 27 files,
300 megabytes.
yeah, 300 megabytes to create a website that was Hello World? And so at the time, we were all like, this is so dumb. Like, why do people use this? And then later on, we realized as you build more complex projects, like the reason why people use these frameworks is because they've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And that's why there's 300 megabytes of code that is seemingly unused on small projects. But that code becomes more useful as you build larger projects. And
And it cuts out all the BS too, like all the, it gets rid of a lot of the boilerplate nonsense you have to do every time you start something. That's a lot of work. So it does make
yeah,
it a lot more manageable, I think, for an individual to do larger scale things on their own.
yeah, definitely. And I know, Eric, you're building, I think you still are building the homeschooling app with Next.js, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about that project with everybody?
Yeah, so me and my wife homeschool our kids, and so she was trying to find um a website that she could use to track hours and coursework and things like that. She found one that she was using, but she, in her research, realized that there's not much out there as far as options for homeschoolers.
Yeah.
So I decided that I'll build one, build one for her. So that's what I've been working on.
Nice.
It's a cool
Yeah.
project. And you said that's necessary, right? Too, because you need that in order to get like for like transcripts and stuff and like to get into
Right.
other things.
Yeah, that was her main reason, because like she needed to be able to put all that information into something and make transcripts for when they want to go to college.
Yeah. Um, what was I gonna say? Uh,
I remember actually when we were talking about that day when we were coming up with different projects because
mm,
like your advisors told you, it's important to do projects. And like projects are super
yeah,
important, but it's helpful to do projects that are personally meaningful. Like
yeah,
building a to-do app, it's a project, but it doesn't mean that much. So I remember that day where we were all kind of brainstorming projects and and you came up with that one, and that one was one where it's like it was almost too obvious for you because you knew you needed it, but it just didn't seem like it was a project that you should do because maybe it's not like the typical project that someone would do.
Right.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's I was gonna actually say that is, it's funny that you actually got this advice from the university where they're like, yeah, you just got to build projects, and yet they can't point you in a direction. And I think that's, I've talked to a lot of people about creating sort of a passion project, and I think that's actually a big roadblock for people. And it sounded sort of like the same for you is, and for me too. Like I think everybody sort of goes through this when they get to the point of, okay, I have enough knowledge under my belt that I can start building some stuff, but what? Like, how do I figure out what to build? And that's, obviously what we talk about inside the program, but having something where it's meaningful to you and solves a problem that you personally have is usually the best place to start, because if it's a problem that you personally have, it means that other people do. And I can actually tell you that right now we're going through the same thing because one of my kids is homeschooling, and we have to track her stuff now. And so there are some apps out there, but they're all lacking in one way or the other. And that's why software is so amazing, because there's plenty of people who can build software, and there's a ton of software for pretty much everything. But if you look at software across the board, for each individual person's use case, there's always probably some little piece that's lacking a little bit. And so it's an amazing thing to be able to be a software developer and say, hey, I want to build this thing that solves all of my problems. and then being able to like take that from an idea into reality. So, so far you've been using Next.js to build that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Have you had any sort of like roadblocks with that, and how have you overcome those, or with anything else? I mean,
Um, yeah, I think initially, like I had the idea, I just really didn't know how to get started with it and
yeah,
what I needed to do. Um, and then I think for I've done most of the pages for it, so I have a lot of the front end done. I think um I connected Firebase for
awesome.
authentication, and I'm going to use that for hosting as well. I struggle with that a little bit to begin with. I'm still learning it, so that's
Yeah,
been one of my roadblocks. But just reading through the docs and watching tutorials on it, I think has helped with knowing how to use it.
that's awesome.
That's one of the
Yeah,
tough things too, because when you're first starting, it's always everything is new, so it does take time to get
yeah,
used to it, but it gets easier every time you do it too, which is awesome.
It's
yeah.
been a long process in this project, but I think that's just because it's a learning project really, because I'm
Yeah.
doing the project and learning how to use all this technology at the same time.
Yeah. It's also a large project. And I was going to say this, and I was watching something the other day, and I think this made a lot of sense to me is when we watch these tutorials, I think everybody goes through this when you're a software developer or learning at least, right? Is we watch these tutorials on YouTube or wherever you find them. And what you're getting when you watch that is a curated, finished, polished project that somebody's just coding over again for you, like live, right? And one of the issues with that is you're not seeing the actual process of what's going on, right? Because every time that some software is built, whether it's a website, a web app, or any other piece of software, it's not a point A to point B thing, right? And that's the misconception that I think is given to a lot of people when they watch a tutorial is I start with this idea and then I just start coding and then it ends up as this thing. And the reality is like there's
With
a
no
million,
roadblocks or anything,
yeah,
it's
there's
just a smooth process.
yeah, it's like pretty much every line of code is there's something to get over. And what what is lost in that is actually all of the learning, right? Because the learning process is exactly what you're doing right now with your homeschooling app, which is I try something, like I go out there and I like read the docs, I put what I see into practice. It doesn't work the first time, like every
Right.
time. And then you're like, shit, now what do I do? How do I debug this? How do I fix this? And then you get to a point where you fixed it and you're like, oh, that thing is what I did wrong. And that's the learning, right? And so when you do a tutorial, you actually never really get the learning part of it because you're just following along. And most people, I know I did this, is, whenever, especially now when I'm making a lot of this content, I'm like, hey, all right, we finished a project. Now go make it your own. Like add a feature to it, add something. And most people don't actually do that. And that's where the learning comes in, right? Because you're like, hey, we built, let's say you built the homeschooling app and you're showing people how to do that. You're like, cool, now you add a feature. And most people are like, yeah, it sounds great, but I'll just wait till my next project to try to figure that out, right? So I totally get that, and I think that's something that is really nice about being inside the incubator is that we get to build projects together. We're currently working on this restaurant app, and each person has contributed whatever amount they have time to spare, but we're getting to see like the issues and the things that you run into in a real world application build that you wouldn't see if you
And
just
talking it
do a
out
tutorial.
together, which is also
Yeah,
important too,
exactly.
because you get to see, like, make those decisions and then see how that affects overall, right? What's going on, the direction that's going to go in the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming up sort of towards the end, but before we do, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you've been doing with local companies and like how you've been going out to start generating some money. So I know I was on a call with you with a discovery call for one prospect that didn't end up turning into anything. But I know you did recently fix up somebody's Wix site, which now looks awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about like your experience with that, what you've been doing, how that feels for you, if it's like uncomfortable, and what your next step is? Because I know you're soon to be the supper club king of the West. So can you share a
Dude,
little
get
bit
a
about
belt
that?
buckle for that. That'd be awesome.
Just remember the small people.
Yeah.
That's all I ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that first site I did, the Wix site,
Mhm.
I was actually referred by by a relative of mine to fix
Nice.
that person's website.
So you use your
I
local network. Awesome.
Yeah, and initially I offered to do the site for them for free, just to so I can have something to put on my portfolio.
Hmm.
But eventually that project turned into a paying customer. And I
Nice.
did the work that they wanted, but then they wanted more work, but they felt like they needed to pay me for it, which was nice
Yeah.
feeling to have, that they realized that I can do the work and get paid for it.
It's nice
Yeah.
too when they realize that
So-
on their own, right? That's
Right.
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Did you feel a difference when you became a paid web developer?
Yeah, I felt a little different. I felt, I guess, maybe a little more pressure to actually do better work than, like, if I'm just
Mm.
doing it for free, it's like, I guess you don't really care as much um how, like, much work you're putting into making it look really good because you're not getting paid for it.
yeah.
Um
Mhm.
but
Back in April when you joined Web Dev Incubator, what do you think that, like, if you were to go back then, what do you think are the chances that you'd be a paid web developer within the year?
very slim. um I mean, really, that wasn't even on my mind before I joined the incubator. I didn't even think about doing freelance work. um and
It's such a good way to build those projects that you need anyway. And I think, and
Yeah.
they're real and they're live, which is way better than,
right,
the
Yeah.
alternative.
Well,
yeah,
I want to think about this too, right? Is like, imagine that you had just gotten your university degree and then you were at a job interview and they were like, tell me some of your experience building projects. How would you have answered that question versus how you could answer that now, right? It's a totally different scenario, I think. Do you feel
right.
that way, or like what would you have done if I was like, Eric, tell me like about the last project you built?
I wouldn't have anything to tell. I would have said, well, I have zero projects. All I've
I have
done is
Hello
my
World in
coursework.
Java, Hello World in Python, Hello
Yeah.
World in
In Docker,
Yeah,
it's super
Uh,
complicated, but check
yeah,
this out.
Yeah.
yeah.
I have
Oh
a
my God.
Google Cloud and yeah, all these different other accounts. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say this too, since we're getting to the end. If anybody who's watching, because there's quite a few people in here, which is awesome. If you guys have questions for Eric, um, I know Matthew said, thanks for joining and how are you doing? Even though he wrote, how dare are you doing? But I think he meant, how are you doing? But if you guys have questions for Eric, throw them in the comments and we'll ask them to him. But I love if you can continue sort of elaborating on what you've been doing with this company. So they started paying you. So, right. So you did some work for them for free, correct?
right,
And then they started paying you, right? Because I think this is important, is like they saw a value in what you were doing, right? They
right.
saw that like this is a big change. So what is it that they actually came to you for? Like what was wrong with their website? How did you improve it? And then what was the paid part of that?
So it was a mother-daughter that did their own website on Wix themselves. They knew nothing about websites. And so the website just looked horrible, was disorganized, and they had customers telling them all the time, "Hey, you need a new website. I can't find anything on your website."
It's a good
And
example though that if you don't know anything about it, even those
Yeah.
low code solutions are going to be hard to use to come up
Yeah.
with something nice, you know?
Yeah, for
yeah,
like a
so
business owner.
I just told them, "Hey, I can do this for free for you. I just want a testimonial to put on my portfolio. And I can make your website look better," which is what I did. Um, but and then I finished that part for them and they really loved it. But then they came back and said, "Hey, we're looking at other websites. We'd like our website to look more like this. These are some thoughts we had about it." So I said, "Yeah, I can do that." And they're like, "We'll pay you for it." So
Nice.
I said, "Perfect, that works for me."
I
And
like money.
That's good for me too. Also a good deal.
so I actually just finished that up this past week.
Yeah, and it
And
looks awesome, man. I have to say, I
It
looked
does,
over
and
the whole
thanks.
website. It looks
that's a
great.
great way, right? Where you start out for free, but then everybody's always going to want updates, changes, things added,
Yeah.
and that's
And
awesome because
think
that's a
like the
great
next
direction to go
time
with
that
it.
they want something, who are they going to go to?
Or
Some
if they know
Right.
Or when
somebody,
they have a
right?
friend who needs
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody wanted to know where you went again to school. What was that? It was
I
University of
went to
Phoenix.
University of Phoenix
Yeah,
online.
online. So yeah, so I mean, I think your experience is pretty similar to any other experience. I know Randall recently did a master's in cybersecurity and had a fairly similar experience, even in a master's program. Is like, great, all this sounds good, but none of it's practical, right? It's all
None
just
whatsoever.
theory. So yeah. Bryce said,
Mhm.
are they paying you to maintain the website as well?
I've discussed that with them. They so far haven't said that they wanted that. They this site, I don't know what I would do to maintain it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just an informational site. There's not a whole lot. They just have some pictures and information about their business. But I did tell them that I have maintenance packages, and they last I heard from them, they said that um, if they had that need, that they would let me know.
nice.
Nice.
So thinking back to when you first joined the Code Noobs Facebook group, because there are a lot of people who have been joining recently. So what advice would you give them for how to get the most from their experience here in the group?
Um, I would say interaction in the group, and the most value I've received from the group is being in the incubator. That was my main reason for joining. Really because when I was searching Facebook, I was searching for mentors. Um, I don't know how that search started. I think I was looking at a blog or something like that, that just looking for suggestions on how to um, get more into development. And that was one of the things they said, is to get a mentor. So
Yeah.
that's really what I was looking for. And I would say the biggest value of this group is the incubator and the direct mentorship.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Cool.
appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll
David
put that
Campbell.
$100 in your account. So thank you for the
Yeah,
testimonial.
check's in the mail. David Campbell asks, can we see the website? I guess the Wix site that you built, just asking for curious people, inquiring minds want to know. If you feel like sharing that, by all means.
Yeah, if you just go to Eden Restored Health, me, I don't remember the exact website. I think it's Health Market.
Yeah.
We can put it in
Yeah,
the
it's
comments too.
EdenRestoredHealthMarket.com.
There you go.
EdenRestoredHealthMarket.com.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of touch on the topic that you just mentioned with the mentorship. And I think this is something that, it's part of the reason why we built Code Noobs, is that when we were in our boot camp, because for anybody who doesn't know, Randall, Danny, and myself took a boot camp together. And, while we were going through this boot camp, I would say that the three of us have probably more tech experience prior to going into a boot camp than most people do. I've been
A
in
lot of
digital
people didn't even know
marketing,
how to use their
SEO.
computers. Like, yeah, it
Yeah,
was insane.
yeah. And I've been doing like a lot of things online for years before ever going into a boot camp. So but I think what we realized when we were in that boot camp is there's just not enough human support, right? Like actual support. There's a ton of content, there's a ton of tutorials and things that you can follow, but when it comes down to, hey, I have an issue, um, the instructors that we had in our boot camp could only probably answer questions maybe 50% of the time, and they weren't engaging the group. They weren't providing anything more than just what the content was.
They
Like,
had just finished the program, the week
yeah, they were
before.
graduates of the boot camp as well. Yeah. And so, and a lot of like what they would, so the only time that we could actually interact with uh, one of our like, so we had like one instructor, I guess, per like block of the boot camp. The only time that we could actually converse with them was on a weekly workshop call, which was I think 2 or 3 hours. But the majority of that call was them just reading over the content that we were supposed to read that week because most of our boot camp fellow students didn't do it. And so there was nothing more to it, right? They were just reading the same content that was already there, just regurgitating it. And I think what really benefited the three of us was that in our boot camp, we actually met separately outside of the workshop call. And we were able to sort of mentor each other because we were each interested in different things. And so that was super helpful. And we realized this is missing. And that's why we built this group. And it's been amazing to watch what's happened inside of this group because it is curated, right? If you go look on Facebook, there's a ton of coding, quote unquote, coding groups out there, but I mean they're more like OnlyFans than coding. Like there's like more spam and
That's
porn
the hook,
than
though.
anything.
That's the
Yeah,
hook that
I
gets you
know.
in.
They're like, hey,
That's the
join
only
our
reason I
coding
want to become
group.
a developer.
Yeah, yeah,
This is what development is. I had the wrong
yeah.
idea.
This is awesome, man. Yeah. But we've really strived to like keep this group curated, remove people who share spam and junk, and I think that's what you're seeing here, right? Is the product of that is people who are really dedicated to this idea, like Eric, right? Like Eric took this on saying, hey, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to make it work. Right. And so I think that's one of the amazing things about everybody who's inside of the incubator right now is that you guys are very dedicated to this idea and you're willing to push through these roadblocks. And as mentors, we're able to actually help you and point you in the right direction and help you get over those things. So I just want to say, Eric, it's been amazing having you inside the group. I'm really proud
Oh
of
yeah.
what you've done. Right. I don't even want to take credit for it because it is all on you, right? I can't teach you anything. I can only show you the path, right? And so it is really amazing. I just want to like congratulate you on the progress that you've had in just a few short months and think about how that's going to turn out in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. Your whole life can change based on one decision you made in April,
Oh
which
yeah.
is really, really amazing thing. So
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with that, there's a bunch of really amazing comments. Way to go, Eric. Thank you for sharing. They like the website. I don't know if you're seeing these comments, but really just amazing. Thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciate having you in the group and you sharing with us today your experience. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave everybody off with? Anything like that?
I think Eric's just a good example of what you can do, though, if you
Yeah,
just commit to it.
yeah. And that's really what it takes, right? It's just a commitment, a mental commitment, and saying, this is what I want with my life. I'm done being a truck driver. I'm going to do everything I can to become a software developer and take it one step at a time, right? And with a good group of people behind you, there's no way you can fail. So amazing, amazing stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. If you are inside the Web Dev Incubator, we'll see you in about 20 minutes. We're actually doing our quarterly planning. So this should be a great one to have. And I know a bunch of the people in the comments are already in there, but if you
And
guys
if you
are
want more
curious,
information about
yeah,
the Web Dev Incubator, you can write truck driver down in the comments.
yeah. And I wanted to say this too. This is actually really important. I've totally forgot to say this. So we have a mini course, which will be launched on Monday. Okay, so it's almost, it's like in its final stages. We're just getting the sales page set up and everything. The mini course is really cool. So if you're brand new, if you guys have pretty much no experience and you want to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript vanilla, it's an amazing course. It's going to teach you the theory behind all of them. There's a bunch of code alongs so you can actually code and see how to use these things. And then also there's an awesome project, which is you're building a Pokemon Chrome extension. I think I've showed that off in the group before, but
It's really cool,
basically,
and there's a lot of content in it. It's awesome.
yeah, it's really great. So we'll be releasing that on Monday. If you do join that on Monday, we'll give you a 50% off code so you can get into that. But the other thing I want to mention is as soon as that goes live, the price for the Web Dev Incubator will go up. Okay, so if you are interested in getting into the Web Dev Incubator at the beta pricing, which we're still offering, this is your last shot. After that, the pricing is going up. There's a lot of people in the group now, and we want to make sure that we're giving everybody value. So we're not giving this pricing anymore because we need to limit how many people are joining the group. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Drop truck driver in the comments if you want more information. We'll set up an action call with you and get you inside the incubator. Otherwise, if you're inside the incubator, we'll see you in 20 minutes. If not, we will see you this time next week.
Thanks again, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate your
Thanks so
time.
much, Eric.
And we'll see you guys next week. Peace out.